Over 60 years ago, I followed my heart into Africa to study chimpanzees. 35 years later, my heart led me out of the forest to help save the natural world. And today, there are still so many reasons for hope. I haven't met an endangered species anywhere in the world where there isn't a group of people who are fighting to save it. Young people, once they know the problems and are empowered to take action, they are changing the world. Nature is amazingly resilient. Even places that we've utterly destroyed, nature will reclaim that land and once again make it beautiful. It was my mother who said, if you're going to do a thing, give it all you have. Everybody is asking me, where do you get the energy to carry on? It's partly that I care passionately. I suppose on top of that, I'm pretty pig-headed, and I'm not going to give in.
My name is Matthew Desmond. I'm a professor of sociology at Princeton University, where I direct the Eviction Lab, which is a research group dedicated to understanding the causes and consequences of housing instability. I come before you today gravely concerned about millions of American families brutalized by our country's painful and utterly predictable rental housing crisis. Since 1985, rent prices have exceeded income gains by 325%. Most poor renting families today spend at least half of their income on housing costs, with 1 in 4 spending over 70% of their income on shelter costs alone. Last year, rents increased faster than they ever have on record. Nationwide, median asking rent increased by 17% in a single year, but some cities saw rent increases double that. As a direct result of the housing crisis, the United States has a much higher eviction rate than other industrialized democracies. The number of eviction filings has increased by 21% since 2000, rising to 3.6 million cases filed in an average year. Eviction is incredibly harmful to families and communities. It leads to job loss and homelessness, to depression and suicide. The evidence is in, and the evidence is clear. Eviction is not just a condition of poverty, it is a cause of poverty. Why have rents risen so aggressively? One possibility is that property owners' expenses have gone up, and to maintain a steady income, owners have to pass on rising housing costs to tenants in the form of higher rents. But this is not what the data show to be happening. Rather, in recent years, owners of multifamily properties have seen their rental revenues increase at a faster rate than their expenses. This has been especially true for properties located in low-income neighborhoods. The owners of these properties saw their rental revenues increase by 47% between 2012 and 2018. Their expenses during that time only increased by 14%. Both the private housing market and the federal government have failed to provide American families with enough affordable housing. As a result, property owners have seized the opportunity to increase rents, knowing they have a captive tenant base. We need to increase the supply of affordable housing, but families need relief now, not 10 years from now when the doors open, but today. Congress could provide much needed relief by deepening investments in housing vouchers. I urge this committee to pass the Eviction Crisis Act and the Family Stability Opportunity Vouchers Act, two bipartisan sponsored bills that would help stem the bleeding. And you can extend the emergency rental assistance, which did so much to prevent an eviction spike during the pandemic. When we boost incomes for working families through government programs or economic growth, but don't address rents, income gains are often recouped by the housing market. Studies have shown that when states raise minimum wages, landlords respond by raising the rent. The implication is that investing in affordable housing isn't only necessary to stabilize families and communities, it's also essential because the success of all other economic mobility efforts depend on it. Now is not the time for inaction, for indecisiveness, or for the same old tired debates about spending. We could pay for deeper investments in housing in dozens of ways. Simply collecting unpaid federal income tax from the top 1% of households would bring in an estimated $175 billion a year. What we can no longer do is look renting families in the face, families now living in cars and garages and attics and storage sheds in the richest country on the planet, and tell those families, you know, we'd love to help you, but we just can't afford it, because that is a lie.
I love this. My goodness. What tribe are you from?
I am from Pochuri tribe.
Okay, Pochuri.
Yeah, Pochuri.
Beautiful. So what were you trying to learn there? So is this everybody gets together at the end and does a unifying dance?
Yeah, that was a unity dance. We call it a unity dance.
Yeah, beautiful.
Yeah.
So she tells me for 10 days, cultural troops from individual tribes perform in the central arena. But the unity dance brings all the tribes together in a singing and dance performance. Each tribe sends a troupe to represent their culture through dance, song, rituals, and games. Young men and women, part of this troupe, stream into Kasama every day and come evening, head back to their camps.
So how many times do you perform your dance?
After we get to our camp, we used to rehearse in the evening, and when we wake up in the morning, we used to rehearse once again. Yeah. Before coming to the arena, we used to rehearse again.
A lot of stamina, yeah? By the 10th day, you must be exhausted.
No, we are Nagas. We have the stamina.
We are Nagas. Yeah, I'm getting to know that. We are Nagas.
That colourful attire, the warrior-like call. What I see are two distinct faces of Naga society. A beautiful blend of ancient and the modern. A perfect balance for my culture-loving palate is seen in a way the Nagas dress, the food they eat, and of course their music. And the background music to my entire experience is the sound of the Naga drumbeat. And I follow that sound once again.
Got it. First beat is a warning call, so if there's fire or danger, yeah, and the second one is for festivities for the Owl tribe. Are we ready?
Yes!
I love it. That was great.
That was a warning call, and now the celebration beats.
Thank you. That was amazing.
The log drum, in many ways, symbolises the tribal way of living. It can't be played by the individual. It takes a group, a brotherhood, to get a rhythm going. And the Hornbill Festival ends with this spirit of unity.
The word disabled athlete, I absolutely hate it. I don't look at myself as disabled at all. I have a disability. Everybody in this world has a disability of some sort, but you're only disabled if you believe you are. I'm just an athlete that needs a couple extra tools.
This great big story was made possible by Geico. Believe it, Geico could save you 15% or more on car insurance.
My competitive history started out on a BMX bike when I was like 13 years old, which quickly evolved into motocross, and then got into racing snowmobiles. At the peak of my pro career, I had finished 4th place in the national championship series. I'd landed on the podium a handful of times. In 2008, during a qualifying race in northern Michigan, I was thrown from my machine, which caused a compound fracture that severed the main artery that feeds my lower leg. It was apparent 3 days later that amputation was the only way to basically save my life. I was floored. I mean, I didn't see it coming at all. My profession and livelihood is to be racing a snowmobile or a dirt bike. You know, initially I'm like, I'm going to be done racing, I'm going to be done competing. But about 5 weeks after the injury had happened, I got to try out my new prosthetic leg. The first leg that I got, it worked okay for walking. It was really basic mechanical leg. I actually got on my snowmobile within a week or so of getting it, and right away I understood that, yeah, this leg is definitely not gonna be the ticket for me to get back into the sports that I love. I was presented with this problem. Basically, I needed to absorb impact with my leg, like my quadricep muscles do. I know suspension components from the dirt bikes and snowmobiles, so I'm looking at this as a suspension component. I need a shock, a spring, and a frame to hold it all and make it move in the directions I needed to move. You know, I drew on it for about 5 weeks or so, just pencil sketches and pages of designs, and then from there I went to the shop and started cutting parts. I had all the pieces and assembled it, put it on my leg, and then immediately went over to my dirt bike and went for a ride. 7 months after my accident, I was racing dirt bikes on a leg that I built in my garage. The original Moto Knee was developed for me to get back on my dirt bike, and that summer, after meeting a whole bunch of other amputees, I realized that there's so many other people that could utilize the equipment I was working on, so I started thinking about creating a company around it. The coolest part about what I'm doing is it allows me to continue to be an athlete. So I do all the testing on the racetrack and the practice track, which gets me into a lot of new stuff as well, like snowboarding. Turns out I got pretty good at it, I enjoyed it, got talked into competing for the first time, and that evolved into traveling around the world on the World Cup Tour and earning my spot on the 2018 Paralympic snowboard team, and won a gold medal in border cross and a silver medal in bank slalom. You know, I'm a 9-time X Games gold medalist between adaptive racing and dirt bikes, snowmobiles, and now snow bikes. You know, I've kind of reached my goals with all that, so this year I'm going to step it up a notch and I'm going to try and qualify into the pro snow bike race. I tell you what, it really sucks to be an amputee sometimes, but there's so many different amazing things that I've been able to experience since my injury happened. I'm making the most of the situation and I'm still living life to the fullest.
There is a sense of urgency at the British Antarctic Survey in Cambridge. Here, 14,000 kilometres from the South Pole, scientists are familiarising themselves with an Antarctic research centre before they head out on their mission. Like the ice sheets, their scientific strategy is shifting, from monitoring changes in Arctic environments to delivering the most accurate prediction data to inform policy on climate change.
Things are changing much faster than they have before, so we're losing sea ice, the temperature rising faster in the polar regions than any other part of the planet. We're finding parts of the ice sheet are melting now and possibly going into irreversible melting, so they will contribute to sea level. So there's a lot of urgency now in what's happening in our science in the polar regions and how they're going to affect the rest of the planet.
From autonomous vehicles like the submersible Boaty McBoatface, named in a public vote, to the research vessel Sir David Attenborough, which is essentially a floating laboratory, and artificial intelligence, including creating a digital twin of the entire continent. AI will improve predictions in sea level rises, giving policymakers a tighter focus on what they need to tackle.
We let the AI see everything and look at all the maps and how sea ice has changed over the last 40 years and then project forward. And it was able to do that better than the other models that we've been using up until now.
Scientists here say we can't stop climate change. We've preloaded the atmosphere with carbon dioxide and methane, so the Earth will keep warming and the ice will keep melting, even faster around Antarctica. But sea level rises won't be linear. Instead, we could see sudden, big jumps. All they can do is give policymakers the best models of what is to come.
A key part of this new strategy is studying ice cores brought back from Antarctica and stored here in minus 25 degrees. Now, these particular pieces of ice contain air bubbles from 225 years ago, but they can go back 800,000 years. And they hold concentrations of greenhouse gases that will help scientists predict the future of climate change.
These scientists endure the most inhospitable places on the planet to make the rest of it more hospitable for humanity and hope their hard work won't be wasted. Charlie Angela, Al Jazeera, Cambridge.
Are you a supporter of fair trade? And do you also know the impact of fair trade? Not in the shop, but in the country where the cocoa came from. Most people I asked don't. And when I finally learned that the fair trade premium per average chocolate bar is less than 1 US cent, I was shocked, confused and disappointed. Receiving a share of 9 instead of 8 cents per bar will hardly change many people's lives, nor will it lift millions out of poverty, something I always thought I support when buying fair trade. The frustration about this incredibly small impact, however, gave birth to the idea to change the whole way the chocolate industry works today. Hi, I'm Hendrik, founder of Fairafric. With your help, we're going to make the fairest chocolate the world has ever seen. You probably know that so far, producers would source the cocoa for their finished products cheaply in developing countries and then add all the value during production in Europe, the US or other Western countries. Fairafric is going to turn that upside down and move the value creation to Africa. We're going to source all the ingredients locally on the continent and then make and wrap the chocolate here in Ghana, thus creating fairly paid jobs, train workers, enable them to feed their families, educate their children and gain access to healthcare. By supporting this campaign and bringing Fairafric to supermarket shelves in your home countries, you're not only actively fighting poverty, you're also enabling other consumers to have a lasting positive impact with their purchasing decisions. We've already put a lot of our time and money into Fairafric, and in order to kickstart our first production ever, we need to raise an additional 15,000 euros. With this funding, we'll source the cocoa from Cuapa Cocoa, a Ghanaian cooperative with a track record of some 25 years of successful community work. Their projects range from reforestation, over schooling, to health services and gender initiatives. We will contribute a bonus of $440 per ton of cocoa to their projects and bring the main ingredient for our chocolate to Accra, Ghana's capital city, where CPC, a local processing company, will help us to clean, roast, grind and process the cocoa. We will then use some of their equipment to temper and mold the chocolate. The final step will be to hand wrap the bars before sending them on to you. You remember the depressing 8 cents per bar of chocolate and the fair trade premium of less than 1 cent per bar? Compare that to Fairafric's financial footprint of at least 70 cents that will be spent in Ghana per 100 gram bar of chocolate. This will make a tremendous impact and holds the potential to really change the way people live here. All we need to get started is your support. If we don't make our goal, Fairafric won't happen. So pick one of the perks on the right hand side and let all your friends and family know about the fairest chocolate possible. Thanks for joining us in making the world a better place. Bar by bar.
They travel thousands of miles, risking everything in pursuit of a better life in the United States. For many, the journey brings them here, to El Paso, Texas, where over the past year, the sheer number of migrants created a humanitarian crisis.
It's overwhelming. I think sometimes I cannot absorb all this pain because there's so much going on. We have for the church.
Father Rafael Garcia is pastor of El Paso's Sacred Heart Church. Last winter, he watched as the emergency unfolded on his doorstep.
There were some days when there was like 1,200 people or so around this area, sleeping on the streets, in front of stores, around the church for sure.
Father Garcia leapt into action, turning the church's school gymnasium into a shelter. So, what is it that they receive here?
They receive, first of all, a place to sleep. We have 3 meals a day here prepared. We have some over-the-counter medication. We have a clothing room.
How many people have you been able to serve?
We've served thousands for sure. Thousands and thousands.
Father Garcia had help from an army of volunteers like 83-year-old Frank Padilla, who distributes clothing at the shelter.
I'm very proud of the city. The people that are helping here, they are the heroes. They really make these people feel at home.
Volunteers all over El Paso stepped in to help, handing out thousands of meals a day.
All right, thank you.
And providing critical medical care.
We have vulnerable folks showing up on our doorsteps.
Dr. Brian Elmore has spent most of his adult life volunteering for those in need. He served with the Peace Corps in West Africa, and in 2017 he taught refugees in the Middle East. After graduating from medical school, Brian moved to El Paso.
What is it about that community that made you fall in love with it?
Part of it is the way El Pasoans have risen to respond to this crisis.
Today, Brian divides his time between the ER at El Paso's University Medical Center and clinics where he sees migrant patients like this woman.
La Bestia. This patient, she fell from what's called the Beast, the train that runs throughout Mexico, transports migrants. She fractured her tibia. I come from a privileged background. I have a responsibility to give back and to serve.
Medical student Fabiola Ramirez feels that same sense of responsibility. The stories of the migrants she cares for resonate with her personally.
When I was 14, my family and I moved to the United States, and I remember the struggles.
Do you see yourself reflected in the people that you are serving here?
You see confusion, but you also see excitement and you see hope. And that's the way my family and I felt.
Fabiola is part of a program run by Texas Tech University Health Sciences Center and Doctors of the World that brings medical care to migrants in shelters around El Paso.
Luckily for me, I had a lot of mentors. I want to extend my hand as well. I want to help others, and I want them to succeed, just like I succeeded.
The work is exhausting. The needs are never-ending. But the volunteers here say they are the ones inspired by the people they serve.
What is it that they have taught you?
So migrants arrive here just filled with this hope. It's that land of opportunity for them. It's encouraging to be reminded that people still believe in America. And it makes me want to live up to their expectations, to be the America that they imagine this country to be.
Tonight at 11, the battle to win in the court of public opinion is now waging in full force.
Just hours ago, 61 people were indicted in one massive criminal case, all of them charged with conspiring to use violence to try to stop the construction of Atlanta's future public safety training center.
And tonight, a big part of what their defense may be is already in the works. 11 Alive's John Sherrick has their story.
Protesters exercising their First Amendment rights.
Violence is not political speech.
Georgia Attorney General Chris Carr announcing a grand jury indictment against 61 people, charging them with racketeering, using violence to try to stop construction of Atlanta's new public safety training center.
What I can say is that Dr. King said that violence is the language of the unheard.
Attorney Devin Franklin with the Southern Center for Human Rights in Atlanta says the center is already working to arrange for attorneys for the defendants.
And what we have heard and read in the indictment is not violence. It is alleged property destruction.
It is a distinction, Franklin says, that will be clear when defense attorneys argue that relatively few of the suspects are accused of actual destruction. Attorney General Carr says in this racketeering case, all were involved in some way.
If you come to our state and shoot a police officer, hurl Molotov cocktails at law enforcement, set fire to police vehicles, damage construction equipment, vandalize private homes and businesses, and terrorize their occupants, you can and will be held accountable.
Franklin calls the indictment an overreaction by a government that has failed to silence the protesters any other way.
We are going to be able to make sure that everyone has qualified, competent, zealous legal representation.
All while construction continues on the training center, which as of now is scheduled to open late next year. In Atlanta, John Sherrick, 11 Alive News.
I'd like to thank everyone at Blue Silk for their wonderful experience. I have far exceeded all my expectations. Blue Silk is a wonderful company. Mongolia is a beautiful country with beautiful people. I highly recommend everyone at some point to come to Mongolia.
Just kidding.
I've just had the most wonderful 2 weeks in Mongolia, and it was the highlight today has been an experience of being with all the eagle hunters and the eagle huntress, surrounded by them and their wonderful birds, and also being able to hold an eagle. I never thought I would have that experience. It's a highlight of my trip and a highlight of many trips that I've done, so I'll remember it forever. I'm very grateful to Blue Silk Travel for giving me this opportunity.
Service has been absolutely fantastic. The places we stayed have been great, both at the steppes in the Gobi Desert and out here in Eagle Festival. The Golden Eagle Festival is absolutely the highlight of this trip. One of the most spectacular things is being able to hold the golden eagles and interacting personally with the golden eagle hunters, and it's just all in all, it's just been a fantastic trip. I've been to a lot of places in this world, and this is certainly at the top of the places I've been to.
Right now, Ukraine correspondent for the New York Times, Thomas Gibbons-Neff. He's also a former Marine corporal who led a sniper team in Afghanistan. He recently spent a day embedded with the Ukrainian troops and reflects on those conversations in his latest piece entitled Ukraine, a Sniper Mission and the Myth of a Good Kill. Thomas, thank you so much for being with us. Let me just, for our audience, I want to just read a couple of lines here. We kill not because we're vicious, but because it's our order, our duty, Raptor said. Raptor stood in front of me wrestling with something we dared not talk about in Afghanistan. He was breaking the fourth wall. I think about the people on the other side, he said. They may not want to be here, but they are here. Raptor was working his way through the subject that sniper cultures often avoid. Few times during my deployment did I pause to consider the Taliban, at least in conversation. It would take years to realize how indoctrinated we all were. Thomas, talk about this extraordinary experience of actually being let in to follow Ukrainians around as they were doing what you were doing in Afghanistan.
Yeah, no, thanks for having me. No, I mean, it was definitely kind of a surreal moment. I mean, we had been with the team for a few days and had gone on a mission before, and it was earlier in the day, and Raptor had kind of just come off the gun or off one of the spotting scopes, and we had talked about it at breakfast before about kind of the mental gymnastics I had gone through and my teammates had gone through in the Marine Corps, and what he was kind of grappling with at the same time. And it was it's just one of those moments in your life where it'll kind of always be there. And yeah, it was something else.
Well, you underlined this, Thomas, that for Raptor, his country was invaded, more of a black and white issue. And yeah, he was still struggling with things that, like you said, most sniper cultures don't struggle with. But you've talked about, since coming back to the United States and looking back and talking about how you were, quote, indoctrinated. I'm sure it's been more complex for you. And yet, one thing I noticed in your story, in retelling this remarkable story, is even with that moral clarity that the Russian invasion provided Raptor, he was still exhausted. He was still weary. He was still guilt-ridden about the other side.
I think that gets lost. I think, I call it good guy syndrome. We kind of get lost because there is this moral clarity that we can kind of look back and say, well, the Russians invaded and the Ukrainians are defending their home. But I mean, that doesn't excuse, the level of violence and ferocity and death that these men and women are experiencing every day at levels, when I compare my time in Afghanistan as a Marine, as a journalist versus, what's happening on the ground in Ukraine. I mean, it kind of melts your brain sometimes. So, for Raptor to step back and still feel it on his shoulders, it seemed it made sense. And, it's people, Ukrainians have family in Russia, many of them speak the same language, obviously Russian. So it He's processing a lot too. That, I mean, I didn't really hit on all those notes in the article.
How today, when you see the Ukrainian soldiers that you embed with, how is their morale different than what you and your men experienced in Afghanistan with a more vague mission?
Yeah, I mean, that was actually a conversation at breakfast with Raptor, and I think it was before that mission. But I said at the end of the day, no matter what happens, no matter what. You have your own puzzle and you're making your own choices that will end people's lives. But you can always go to bed with the fact that you're defending your home. And that obviously was something that we did not have in Afghanistan, especially 8-9 years into the war. I think that had been diluted as far as the September 11th attacks and what exactly we were doing there.
All right, Ukraine correspondent for the New York Times, Thomas Gibbons Neff, thank you so much for being here. We greatly appreciate it.